began preparing for my speech today, I had this really interesting process by which I started figuring out what I was going to talk about. In my life, music kind of plays a big role. I'm always listening to music, and frankly, everything that I'm doing in my life, I feel like I could put a song to it. So when I started thinking about describing the power of the pivot and how to use the pivot in your careers and in your companies, I started to hear Salt and Pepper play. I mean, it just like, and I remember I was sitting with my husband and I was like, I've got a great idea for my talk that I'm going to give on the power of the pivot. I'm going to jump on stage, I'm going to wear some spandex, I'm going to put some gold hoops on and some fuchsia lipstick, and I'm going to sing, "You gotta pivot." Yeah, pivot real good. I was like, hey, come on, ladies, stand up and pivot. Yeah, you know, I was just like, it's going to be my rock star moment. It's going to be amazing. And in his British accent, my husband was like, Jill, that's a completely ridiculous idea. And so I took a step back and decided to pivot away from my original idea of trying to impersonate Salt and Pepper, although I think I just did it. So I've taken a slightly more conventional approach, starting with a quick look at the long list of companies that have used the pivot effectively to build remarkable businesses. Avon was founded in 1886 by a gentleman who believed that you could go door to door selling something offline in homes. And offline, I don't think there was online then. But anyways, back then, in 1886, he had this great idea. I'm going to sell books door to door. And what he found is that as doors were open, he was meeting women at home. And in order to get them interested in the books he was selling, he offered a free fragrance sample. Interestingly enough, the women were more interested in the fragrance sample than they were in the books he was selling. And so what did he do? He pivoted from his original kind of plan to develop a business selling door to door, not books, but instead fragrance and makeup. He built a sales force around women that were previously in homes to go door to door, and he created a $10 billion business. Fast forward 100 years, and the power of the pivot remains. Let's take a look at Instagram as an example. Instagram was originally an app that was based around check-ins, and it had a tiny little photo sharing feature. What the founders found over time is that while apps were incredibly important and pervasive, actually all the features that were built into the original app, most of them were not interesting to the consumer. What was really interesting was the photo sharing piece. So they stripped away all the other features in Instagram, relaunched the app, and in 2010 sold the business to Facebook for $1 billion. But it isn't just companies that have used the power of the pivot. People use the power of the pivot. I mean, Jesus carpentered a Messiah. Tony Blair started off as a rock promoter and then eventually became prime minister. Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, a long series of remarkable pivots in his career. From bodybuilder to actor to the governor. And it was always, all of his pivots were in pursuit of his vision. And that was, according to Arnie, the meaning of life is not simply to exist, to survive, but to move ahead, to go up, to achieve, to conquer. And so all of his pivots were in pursuit of developing that kind of remarkable career and frankly conquering all of the accomplishments that he wanted to achieve in his career. Let me talk a little bit about how I've used pivots in my life and how instrumental they've been in kind of getting me to where I am in my career. I moved in 2004 from the Bay Area to work for backcountry.com. It was a $30 million business with 80 employees. I was hired to be the director of marketing. This was a role that was right in my wheelhouse. My background was marketing, and I thought I can drive traffic to a website through SEO, content, email. And I did so pretty successfully for 4 years. And then the founders of the business said, great, we're driving all this traffic to our websites, but we need to convert that traffic better. So we need to develop a product management function, a leader of product management that will really understand the consumers that are coming to our sites and work with the technology team to build features and functionality to better convert that traffic. And so we scoured the earth to look for a head of product management. Unfortunately, we didn't find somebody that worked for Backcountry. The founder, CEO at the time of Backcountry said, Jill, you should do the job. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm a marketing person. I don't know anything about about product management or engineering or user experience design. But after kind of deep conversation and me realizing that in order for me to grow my career, I needed to learn more, I needed to take some risks, I took the job. I became VP of Product Management in 2008. It was one of the most important decisions I've made in my career. And it was absolutely, in every sense of the word, a pivot. From there, I was then, a year later, roughly 2 years later, asked to be the Chief Operating Officer of Backcountry.com. The role, connect all the disparate parts of the business and ensure that we were working together to drive the business forward. It was, again, another pivotal point in my career, a point where I had to kind of move into an uncomfortable place and take on a whole new set of responsibility. But it ultimately led me to the role of CEO. I became CEO in 2011. In 6 years, I went from the director of marketing of a company that was doing $30 million in revenue to the CEO of a company doing $300 million in revenue. Now, interestingly enough, you'll notice I don't have a little piece of clip art to describe what a CEO does. And that's because as I went to Google and looked for a piece of clip art, this is actually what came up in the Google image results. I was like, whoa, there's a bunch of like older white men. That's what CEO is. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting. All my other jobs, there was a very clear kind of representation of what the role was. And as it relates to CEO, it's more about what the person looks like. I went through 71 images, I counted them, until I got to this image. Now it's a guy, not only is it a guy, but it's a guy also taking care of the kids. Interesting, 112 images later, it's CEO Barbie. This has got to be me, right? And then I finally, on number 127, found a woman named Debbie Cavalier, who's CEO of an online learning business. Quite disappointing. So what have I learned, and what maybe can you take with you in terms of using pivots to effectively kind of build a career or build a company? Number one, Salt and Pepper tells you, course correct. When you have an idea, even if you think it's really great, it may not be the best idea. So feel free to kind of embrace change and course correct along your way. Avon will teach us that you have to sometimes pivot in your business to capture the biggest opportunity until you talk to your customers, until you look at data. Your vision probably still is valid and can be meaningful, but how you get there may not look the way it did when you first began your business. Arnie tells us, take some risks for big payoffs. You'll not only end up with some serious muscles, but you may end up a governor. And for me, what is Backcountry and what is kind of my path to CEO taught me, you've got to embrace opportunities when they're in front of you. You have to take risks. You have to be comfortable taking risks. You have to be comfortable changing the course of your life, because it may just be the most effective tool for shattering the glass ceiling. Thank you very much.